This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Nitsahone, and it's Monday, and that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. In this series, I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. Today, we're going to take a look at white card draw effects. It is well known that white has gotten the short end of the stick when it comes to card draw, as it just hasn't been considered an ability that white has easy access to within the color pie. The problem is, every other color has pretty significant access to such effects. For much of Magic's history, when white did get card draw, it was absolutely awful. As a result of this disparity, Wizards of the Coast has tried to find ways to draw cards that still feel white, but white still has the hardest time drawing cards. However, that doesn't mean there aren't any good white card draw effects out there. There are actually quite a few, as we'll see in this video, though most of them have come in recent years, and white's access to the effect still pales in comparison to the other colors. To be eligible for this list, a card had to have a mono-white identity, and it had to be able to draw a card for its controller. In all, there were 140 cards eligible, and in this video we'll talk about the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A first-tier top 8 is worth 2 points, this includes events like Pro Tours, and a second-tier top 8 is worth 1 point, this includes events like Regional Championships. Alright, let's dive into the list. At number 10, it is Core Spirit Dancer. This 2-mana 0/2 loves auras. It gets +2/+2 for each one attached to it, and, importantly for this list, it lets you draw a card every time you cast one. This is one of the ways that white has been given card draw over the years, with cards that draw you a card when you do something that white cares about, whether that be casting an aura, playing a small creature, gaining life, and so on. Unsurprisingly, the Spirit Dancer has been played in decks that play a whole bunch of auras in both historic and modern. These decks generally look to find ways to erase the downsides of playing auras, which is that you put yourself at a massive risk of getting 2-for-1'd. While this often means utilizing creatures with hexproof or indestructibility, the Spirit Dancer's ability also keeps those 2-for-1s from happening. Core Spirit Dancer hasn't gained any points since very early 2022, and as more white card draw is introduced, she is likely to fall off of this list in the future. At number 9, it is Loran of the Third Path. Loran can tap to allow both players to draw a card. This symmetrical sort of card draw is another one of the ways they've been giving white more card draw lately. While symmetrical card draw obviously isn't as good as you just straight up drawing the card, the fact that you get to choose when to use this does usually mean you can find a time to use it when you can derive more benefit out of it more quickly than your opponent can. For instance, you can use it at the end of their turn when they're tapped out. In addition to this effect, Loran is a 2/1 with Vigilance that disenchants something when she enters the battlefield, so she gives you a lot for her mana investment. Despite being from the most recent Standard Legal set, Loran has already accumulated some serious points across multiple formats. Her ability to efficiently add to the board while subtracting from the opponents is in high demand, especially as a sideboard card. So far, she's gained points in Standard, Legacy, and Vintage. She even sees significant main deck play in the Eternal formats, where she more frequently has targets, and she can also more easily be tutored up in those decks. Loran still has a ton of time left in Standard too and is already impacting the Eternal formats, so there's a real chance she could end up at the top of this list, or near it, someday. At number 8, it is Sanctuary Warden. This 6-mana 5/5 Flying Angel comes into play with 2 shield counters, and when she enters the battlefield or attacks, you can remove a counter from one of your creatures or planeswalkers to draw a card, and create a 1/1 creature token. The Angel can, of course, remove its own counters for this effect, and that's a lot of power, as all on its own, this is effectively a 6-mana 5/5 flyer that draws you a card, gives you a 1/1, and is harder than normal to kill, thanks to the single shield counter that remains on it. And it has the potential to be a much larger problem than that. Since she was printed in Streets of New Capenna, the Warden has seen a lot of play in Standard, as the top curve in Esper aggro decks, and as a win condition in control decks like Mono White. She hasn't gained any points outside of Standard, and it doesn't seem super likely she will, but she does still have a ton of time in Standard to accumulate more points. At number 7, it is Defiant Strike, a combat trick that draws you a card. Defiant Strike's effect is fairly minimal beyond that, as it only gives +1/+0, but anytime a cheap card can replace itself, it is much better than it looks. Most of its points also happen to have come in decks that can get extra value out of targeting its creatures with tricks. In its original run-through standard, it was played in heroic decks that utilized heroic cards like Battle-Wise Hoplite, which made Defiant Strike way better since the creature you targeted gave you a big upgrade. After getting printed in another standard legal set in 2019, it saw play in similar decks that looked to abuse the strike with Feather, which would allow you to get it back every single turn, which also means you're drawing an extra card every turn. It is also played in Pioneer aggro decks that feature either Feather, heroic creatures, or both. At number 6, it is Srom Senior Edificer. This is another white creature that draws you a card when you cast some things white likes, in this case, auras, equipment, and vehicles. Most of the time, it's the aura part that matters, as Srom sees play in the same kinds of decks that the Spirit Dancer does, and in Historic, they're usually played together. However, Srom is also legal in Pioneer, where he is the centerpiece of an eponymous aura-heavy deck that combines him with Light Paws and other aura payoffs to make sure the aura action never stops coming. Srom is still seeing play in Pioneer now and is likely to keep gaining points there. At number 5, it is Pure Steel Paladin, another one of these white creatures who draws you a card when you cast the right kind of spell, in this case, equipment. In addition to that, the Paladin also comes with a powerful Metalcraft ability. Once you have 3 or more artifacts around, he makes it so you don't have to pay the equip cost for your equipment, which can result in some pretty silly stuff. And because he draws you so many cards, the Paladin makes it easier for you to assemble Metalcraft in the first place. The Paladin has gained most of its points in Modern, at first in Storm decks that played a bunch of 0-mana equipment like Bonesaw, and constantly bounced them all back to your hand with Retract and then replayed them. This resulted in you drawing a ton of cards and producing a massive Storm count for a lethal Grape Shot, which you would inevitably draw because the Paladin will have allowed you to rip through your entire deck. More recently, though, it's found more consistent success in Hammer Time, a deck that specializes in equipping Colossus Hammer in the extreme early game, which the Paladin enables with its Metalcraft ability. This has been one of the best decks in Modern for a while now, and there's even a Legacy variant that has found some recent success. Pure Steel Paladin is well positioned to continue to move up this list. At number 4, it is Esper Sentinel. This 1-mana 1/1 makes your opponent pay a tax of mana equal to its power the first time they cast a non-creature spell each turn. If they don't, you get to draw. Taxing has long been a common effect in white, so attaching it to an effect that lets you draw a card is a nice deal. This means that the Sentinel can end up being a 1-mana card advantage engine, which is quite impressive. It was printed in Modern Horizons 2, so it was never legal in formats like Standard or Pioneer, but it has proven plenty powerful for the formats it is legal in, which include Historic as a result of being printed in an anthology on Arena. Funnily enough, it has been played alongside Srom in Historic, and alongside Pure Steel Paladin and Hammer Time decks in Modern. Because the tax is equal to its power, running it alongside anything that enhances it makes it even more of a problem, and those decks can certainly do that, while also being able to generate extra value out of the fact that the Sentinel is an artifact. It also finds its way into a variety of white decks in Legacy, including Initiative Aggro and Death and Taxes. The Sentinel is in a good position to keep gaining points. At number 3, it is Wall of Omens. This 2-mana 0/4 wall draws you a card when it enters the battlefield. It is exactly the kind of thing that control decks love, because it allows you to add an obstacle to the board that will help you get to the later part of the game, and at the same time, it digs you deeper into your library. In addition to finding more limited success in both Standard and Extended, the wall has seen play in Modern since the format was created in 2011. At first, it appeared in Birthing Pod decks, which loved that it could generate value for you early, and then you could sacrifice it to search up something else. These decks were eventually banned out of the format, of course, but Wall of Omens has continued to see play in Modern Blue-White Control, and more recently in Modern decks built around abusing Enter the Battlefield abilities with Ephemerate and Yorion. These could allow you to draw even more with the Wall. Yorion has been banned out of Modern, but I think the Wall will continue to pick up points here and there going forward. At number 2, it is Hallowed Moonlight. This instant prevents creatures from entering the battlefield if they weren't cast, and it also draws you a card. Drawing a card with this is important because it means you can simply cast it to replace itself when it isn't needed, and when it is needed, like when your opponent is trying to put something into play from their hand, library, or graveyard without casting it, you end up getting absurd value by preventing that from happening and drawing the card, usually giving you at least a 2-for-1. It was played the most in Standard, a format that featured both Collected Company and Rally the Ancestor decks, and it was great at hosing both of those powerful spells. But it's also seen a bit of play in Modern. It is likely to get passed in the near future by Esper Sentinel though. And at number 1, it is Wedding Announcement, another card that is in Standard right now. The announcement starts out as an enchantment that draws you a card at your instep if you have attacked with 2 or more creatures in your turn. If you haven't attacked with 2 or more creatures, it instead gives you a 1/1 token. Each time it triggers, it gets an invitation counter, and once it gets that third counter, it transforms into Wedding Festivities, which gives you an Anthem effect. Obviously, the tokens it makes while an announcement are enhanced by this, as are all your other creatures. This enchantment has proved to be very powerful, as it provides you with exactly what you need. If you can attack hard enough with your creatures, it helps you draw more cards, and if you don't have enough creatures to do that, well, it gives you one. This often feels like it is giving you far more than just 3 mana worth of value. In addition to being heavily played in Standard, where it appears in all manner of white decks ranging from aggro to control, it's also played in Pioneer white weenie decks. It is likely to extend its lead going forward, though in the long run, it may be surpassed by a card like Esper Sentinel, which sees play in a wider variety of formats. Those are the 10 white card draw effects that have had the biggest impact on competitive Magic. As you can see, many of them are very recent cards, indicating that white has certainly got an upgrade in card draw in the recent past, and I think that's something we can expect to see continuing. If you want to draw cards in your white deck, check out the description where you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each card that appeared in the video. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If you want to catch up on over 530 other MTG Top 10s, you should see the playlist on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.